This is AV SuperFriends Off the Rails, an almost regularly scheduled open discussion on audio and video in higher education. We'll sound off about our most brilliant ideas, our dumbest mistakes, and everything in between. And because this conversation will almost certainly go off the rails at some point, we'll end up covering just about everything else. And now, the AV SuperFriends. For November 19th, 2021, is the AV SuperFriends Off the Rails. Welcome back, everybody. Time for another Friday afternoon podcast adventure. We are back on Friday. 2 shows, 1 week, because next week is Thanksgiving and we don't want to do stuff next week. By the way, guys, I don't think we'll have a meeting on Wednesday next week, so there you go.
No.
We'll just do some administrative stuff right here on the show for everybody. You can all
turn in your weekly reports.
Mm-hmm. Yes, get your time cards in,
yeah.
But we're not going to have a meeting. So my name is Chris Dector. I'm joined today by Larry, Justin, Marc, and Jamie.
Hello.
And today's topic, let's see, what are we talking about today? We're gonna talk about some AV metrics. That is to say, how you do AV in Europe. Mm-hmm. That's not what that means. We're gonna talk about one-time funding and all the possible problems that might bring, but also we're gonna go shopping basically with that one.
Blank check.
But first, and we were just debating this, some AV news. So there's a lot of AV news out there, but we don't want to talk about new products or things like that. That's not very interesting. And we did that on the last show. So go in 2 weeks, go listen to that show in the future from the past. Figure that one out.
Nailed it.
Yeah. But so today's article, what we're going to talk about is from Rave Pubs, who puts out a lot of good news here, good information. This one caught my eye because it's a listicle, and anything that says top 10 or 10 best or the 10 things to look for, that says to me I don't have to read as much, and that's easier to digest, and especially for the other people on this call who probably haven't read it at all and are skimming it furiously right now. But Rave Pubs has an article, the top 10 reasons to work in AV, and I figured, well, we all work in AV, so these are the reasons we're here, right? So what do you guys think of this? I mean, do you want to go through it point by point, or we want to pick out a couple of them, or what's your thoughts?
Why don't you go ahead and just read them off for us?
I'm going to start at the beginning.
Just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Just go through and read them off.
Okay, as fast as we go? All right.
Just go.
Okay, so actually, let's go 10.
You go backwards?
This is written backwards. So this should be top 10 reasons starting with number 10.
No.
So anyway, okay, we'll do it that way. We'll do David Letterman style top 10. So the number 10 reason to work in AV is limited education requirements. You don't have to be able to write your name or spell properly. Number 9, collaboration opportunities, and not like the Dutch in World War II, hopefully. Number 8, advancement. Number 7, the perks. Number 6, money. Number 5, sense of community. Number 4, it's a challenge. Number 3, the cool factor, quote unquote. It's literally in quotes here. Number 2, fun. And number 1, job security. So you have to work in security, I guess, because I mean, I got a badge and a pistol on my first day. I don't know about you guys, but so anyway, so that's our top 10 reasons to work in AV. There you go.
Moving on.
I think all of these are probably pretty interesting to start picking apart. Where do you guys want to start?
I like the dichotomy of 10 and 4. So
10 and 4, limited education,
yes,
and it's a challenge.
Right? Is it a challenge because exactly? So
it's a challenge because you have to work 95 hours a week, right? I mean, that's what everybody's used to. So, but you don't have to be smart to do it. Well, smart and educated, I guess, are two different things.
I think it's the classical degree to success.
Yeah. So what do they? Let's look
paper.
At that. So they talk about, from the education standpoint, they say that there's a lot of education available to you, a lot of things you can learn, a lot of training resources and things like that, but you don't have to have that when you start. You can learn a lot of that on the job, which is, I would say, yeah, that's potentially somewhat unique. I mean, I think we generally, and we've talked about this in the past, especially when hiring students or part-time employees, you hire kind of for attitude, not aptitude. I'm going to hire someone who's the right type of person, and we'll train them in the technical skills they need. So in that sense, yeah, I mean, maybe it's a lower bar to entry. Would that be a better way to phrase it? I don't know.
It could be.
Yeah, that kind of mirrors like other trades that we're used to, right? Electricians and general contractors. It kind of fits in that bucket somewhat because
I hope my electricians are not learning on the job as they're going.
Well, they got, apprentices and foremen and the way they're structured, and they do learn on the job because I've seen that shit happen, right? So it's,
there's other communities in your neighborhood that are not real communities. They're there wiring those houses, just like, baseball players don't learn in the game. They have fields off the field. So
right,
there's a whole other world that we don't know. They're just training communities for electricians and other trades to come in and learn how to frame houses that have never bought.
But Justin, you're specifically talking about like the apprentice program. You can bring someone in new. They've got some basic skills. They're gonna be tied at the hip to somebody for 2 or 4 or 5,000 hours.
I was one of those persons. Yeah. So
one of those persons.
I was one of those persons. Is that correct English?
Yeah,
I'm gathering by the laughter. That was improper to say.
Probably people would be.
We're going to give you the points. Got it. Though, so we're going to put it on the board.
We're going to go to the judges on that one.
Got my points. So yeah, I mean, I get it. I don't necessarily disagree, but it depends on what you're actually doing, because the AV industry, it's a wide range of job duties, right? So it's
one of the things they say here in this paragraph about limited education is solutions either sound good or they don't. They're visually appealing or they aren't. So basically what he's saying is if it works at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how you did it. I would vehemently disagree with that.
No, we're going to talk about that later on in the show.
Because I was just looking at a room recently, a conference room, and the department's asking about, we need to upgrade this. And I go look behind it, and it looks like the way it was installed was the integrator. This was done by an outside integrator who got paid money for this. Looks like they hung a monitor on the wall, and then they used broom poles to stuff as much crap back there as they could, and then ran away before it all fell out.
So they hit like a lot of the stuff. Like they hit the money and they hit the fun and the cool factor and the job security piece of this. They nailed it.
Yeah,
so
done.
They got all of it. So I think this is actually
work, but it's not. I don't think that's a good reflection of what.
To me, this is like the reason why I think it like this is actually a decent list, and I think it represents kind of the changes that are going on across a lot of different industries, in that it's not about like go to school and learn this thing and you're going to get set up for the next 30 years of your life. Like AV acknowledges that it's going to change every 35 minutes and you're going to have to continually learn. And so it's about finding people who want to learn and not necessarily go sit in a classroom for X hundreds of hours to do something. Like you're going to continually amass credits and be engaged with your career as you move forward.
Yes.
I would agree. There's a lot of you come in sideways. I think they mentioned that here too. That most likely, they talk about it from the standpoint of formal training, but I look at it from the standpoint of degree program. Like you said, Mark, you sit in a classroom for 4 years, you get your degree in computer engineering or whatever. But nobody, there probably are by now, but for the most part, nobody goes to school for AV and then works in AV. They all come in sideways from video production or education or computer science or some other direction. I mean, some of the best people who've ever worked for me in AV are like, music education people, or they're marketing or graphic design. That if they have the right attitude, you can make that happen. So, let's not belabor it. Let's move on. Do we want to do number 9, or are there any other ones here to jump out? I don't think we have to do all 10 of these, but
I want to talk about the cool factor, because I feel like the cool factor is really important here. It's that I'm sure all of you acknowledge that you are cool because you work in AV, right? I'm sure. I'm super cool, but
not because
not really what we're talking about. And so I will say that coolness factor for me when I was introduced to the industry was over after like year 3, because you get used to everything when you first go to Infocom. It is super cool. Now I'm expecting the coolness, which kind of, brings everything down to a different level.
I think young people coming into this, they come into this career path. It's easy to be like the gear junkie and just like love to like, oh, look at this thing. It has all these buttons and this widget does this. And like, I guess we're all guilty of that. Like we got into this playing with all these technologies, or whether it be through music or however we got here, there was something we enjoyed about that and we thought it was cool.
Yep.
Right. And so that's, here we are, and we kind of built on that. So there is a cool factor that kind of goes around with it. To ourselves, we think it's cool. Maybe other people don't think that we're cool, but we think it's cool.
And I think the cool factor kind of morphs the longer you're in the industry. Because I believe, like you guys talked about earlier, we all really kind of come in from different directions, and some of us are gearheads and some of us aren't. And when you first kind of get into this, you're like, oh, look at these awesome big ass TVs or speakers so loud they blow your clothes off, right? And name that movie.
Oh shoot! What is that?
Wasn't that a Maxell commercial?
It'll come. No, that was the print advertisements. But so there's one, but that actual line came out of a movie. Somebody will get it here in a moment.
Back to the Future.
But we all get into that, and then we kind of start morphing into the oh, great, another loudspeaker, or oh, cool, look, another thing.
Italian job.
But then we start seeing, that's it, Italian job. And then you start seeing how these things are used, and you think, oh, well, now that's cool. Projectors. Oh, look at these giant ass projector. And then you see it on the side of a building. You're like, whoa, hold on. Now that's cool. And then you start seeing it pop up like in people's yards. And you're like, oh, I see how he did it. And now, so it takes on this different level of cool. I think that's kind of the fun part.
The creative cool.
And it morphs. And I think we're all on that part of, look, the gear is gear, right?
It's just
but
stuff.
now there's other things that we're like, whoa, now that's innovate. Now, okay, that was unique. Let's play with that toy.
Yeah, I like where you're going with this, Jamie. And this is the one thing that was glaring to me that's not on the list is kind of what you're talking about, but just simply sitting back after you design a system and creating something that someone uses to address problems in their everyday life, and then the joy that the people get consuming that audiovisual system, and you know that it was successful, which we'll get into the metrics later. That's what keeps me going, is not the gadgets, but creating, like somebody coming to you with this problem that you feel they've gone to other places to figure this problem out and they couldn't, and you were the one to do it. That's
I think you've shifted into the next one, which is the fun piece of this, right? When you do this, where you're creating these experiences, and that's fun, right? And so that's, but you know that all the stuff, and we could use it or not use it, but you've got to do something with it, right? And so what is it that we do with these things that are cool? And I think, you know, creating those experiences, I think, are why we really want to do this. So.
Any other ones here jump out at anybody? The job security one I find a little strange, because I think maybe in higher ed AV in particular, you have pretty good job security, but that's not so much AV related as much as it's higher ed related.
And that's even debatable these days.
It's so construction. It's so construction based.
Yeah.
Well,
that,
it's coming from
when construction tanks, so does our industry.
Yeah.
I think there is a bit of voodoo still at large around AV. Right, when you have a lot of IT departments that don't necessarily understand it, and they kind of look at there might be some like mystical arts going on within what's going, you know, in the solutions, and you're like, well, that's AV. We don't know. I don't understand that. So what? So I don't know. And some of that may be the fun part too. But to me, there's also like the piece of like I came out of live sound, and when I was in live sound, I really liked like the fright that was there, that this whole thing could just come tumbling down at any moment and it could be a complete failure, but the show went on and it was a success. And so there's something fun about the fright built into some of this. And we start looking at giant projects, and you're going through these, you're like, wow, this is like, I hope this ends up working in the end. It doesn't end up just collapsing on me.
Yeah, kind of that voodoo thing that you were talking about. You know, we've been talking about my video wall. We had a drywaller come in to finish off that wall, and I was showing him kind of what I've done to the house and AV over IP stuff, and he was blown away that I had the same content on all 5 or 6 of my TVs or whatever throughout the house, upstairs and downstairs, and he just couldn't understand.
You must be paying for like 12 different cable boxes.
You know, he's big in the home theater and stuff, but it just didn't. I tried to explain it to him, and so there's some satisfaction with that there, that showing people something new.
Yeah. I like it.
So there you go. There's 10 plus a bunch of other reasons why we like working in AV. I don't know. Any last thoughts on any of these points, or I guess maybe the topic in general of top 10 reasons, or maybe just top reasons to work in AV?
Hey, it's an industry, I guess. Now it's finally there. There's a top 10 of reasons to work in it. So we made it.
That's how you gauge industry success.
That's it. Once you get a top 10
article about us, if so, then
it's time to start looking outside of AV now.
Yep.
Or look for another industry to come out sideways out of AV. Yeah.
Swallow it up.
All right, so that link will be in the description, the episode description here, so you can go ahead and read that. But we'll take a quick break, and then we're going to come back and talk about some metrics as to how we judge success in our projects and such. Mark, push a button.
There's a great new digital magazine from Higher Ed AV Media found at higherEdAV.com, and we do a special monthly show where we actually stay on topic. It's a show where we try to really focus on a single topic and break it down into AV SuperFriends style. That's AV SuperFriends on topic, found at avsuperfriends.com, higheredav.com, iTunes, Amazon, Spotify, Google, and wherever else you get your podcasts from.
So our first topic for today is metric AV. No, read that backwards again. AV metrics in higher ed. So
it's Canadian
Marc,
today.
It's Canadian AV.
A.
It's all just a little more polite, but costs 10% more. So Marc, you've brought this up several times. From a standpoint of general AV, from a standpoint of projects, we know we have a successful project. How do we know we've done what we initially set out to accomplish? And as we just talked about in that previous article,
successful project?
Well, so that previous article just said, "Oh, there's a picture on the screen and you can hear it. Success." And we're like, "No,
if that's the criteria."
That I would say that's probably like the minimum. That's like you have a functional system.
That's your floor.
That's your base floor, and maybe not even that. But is that how you measure
it's a D-
success?
passing grade is what you're telling me.
Is D- passing? I thought you get C to pass. I don't know.
D's to get degrees is what I hear.
Yep.
All right. Well, I worked too hard in college then, apparently. So this general question of how do you measure success? I mean, what is our metric? What is our method of determining whether or not we have a successful project? And I guess, does that mean from the standpoint of technology? Does that mean the standpoint of actual use case? Or does that go back to that initial question, which hopefully was asked during needs analysis?
I want to strip off like the whole project. Remove that out of this. I want to just talk it holistically. Metrics of success in AV. Because I think once you start going down the project path, it changes the dynamic of this conversation radically.
Okay. So we're going to keep it real high level.
Yeah, because I feel like, if let's just pretend maybe you had some people that came and asked you, why do you do what you do and how do you know if you're successful? Let's pretend that happened. Maybe some asking for a friend. If that happened for you, what would you say? Like, how do you answer that question?
So let's just pretend that maybe that happened to you. I mean, who maybe would have brought that to your attention? Maybe like your boss or your boss's boss?
It's a different pay grade than the one I currently sit in. Yeah,
it's usually a consultant.
Well, that's a valid, though. I've been consulted many a time when people say, you're not a professional, you work in higher ed. So I guess I'm not the one to set that bar. So, so it brings up this question, So how do you define success? And at one point in my career, it may have been, does the show go on? Then it was successful. Our room's still working. Well, I guess that must be a success. But we know that there's more to it than that, right? And Larry, I think you're in the middle of a degree here, right? So you're getting a whole different level of. So when you think about teaching and learning, like I'm sure when you're thinking about teaching and learning, you're not saying does that projector turn on or off? Does that screen work? Right? There's a different level of success you're having. So how do we tie it to our mission? And I am going to kind of put bumpers on this conversation within higher ed. Okay, I want to keep it in that context.
Well, I was actually thinking about this topic earlier this week. I do a little bit of show prep. And one thing I was thinking is I think part of it ties back to where the AV group is aligned within the university. If you're part of the facilities, it's probably total cost of ownership plays a bigger part. If you're part of IT, it's probably part of that uptime and keeping the systems up and going. If you're part of the learning technology group, you're probably starting to dive a little bit deeper into outcomes. And are the systems that you're providing supporting pedagogy in the classroom?
Right. Because I can make systems that like turn a red light on in the room. I log in a room, the red light turns on. My job's done. I'm successful. I'm out of here. And like, look at my system.
That light's supposed to be red?
Right. Oh. Exactly. It's like,
I need to go fix my system.
So all my metrics say, hey, I look at my spreadsheet and I look at my software and red light's on. Success, right? That doesn't speak at all to what the end goal was within the space itself. And I think we are kind of going to get into like scope of work and defining like what does it mean to create a space that is, creates exceptional AV experience, learning experience, whatever that is. And do we think of that when we kind of offer services in our own departments or amongst our group? Or do we really look at it as break fix? Like I'm just responding to putting out fires as long as it's up and running, my job's done. Like, and I don't think there's a right or wrong, but I think that we're shifting in higher education towards this being more closely aligned from those teaching and learning groups to really think about, are we deploying the right tools? Are we creating those correct experiences? Not just, is there a projector on, is there a screen, or is there a computer? There's more to it than that.
Yeah, and we just went through that hiring my peer, right? We added another design position, an entry-level one here, and we talked about that a couple of months ago. And he and I were just discussing that this week, because he's starting to get into that point where some of the things that he's cobbled together, he's putting out there, and it's like, how do you measure? And that was the question, is like, how do you measure your success? Because sometimes we do have a scope document. Sometimes you've sat down and you say, hey, we want to do these 8 things. And you said, great, I gave you 10 things, and guess what? They're all easy to use. And the person says, yes, they are, and whatever, right? So is that successful? We'll see. Or did you give them 8 things that they can't function? So technically you met all your needs, but did you really? But and so that came up, but I said sometimes the hardest one to answer is the project he had was using some of the CARES money to update administrative conference rooms and in the C-suite area. And so it was, how do you measure your success in there? Because we know how to deploy these things. We kind of knew what the option was, is they want to have their meetings, right, without dragging a cart in there and be really low overhang. And he goes, well, I don't know how to measure the success, because they don't always complain, but then when they do, it's well, it never worked kind of deal. Well, it does work, but it doesn't, but they're not coming to training, but they are. I said, so that's the part. We didn't come to any answers, but we asked a lot of those questions. We feel like we gave them exactly what they needed, but how? Usually that gets measured, and it's way too late.
Right.
By the time it's measured.
I always did like this little analogy, weird story, is that we can also get lost in the task, right? We know that we can deliver milestones and get there from that project. And that's why I said I want to be very specific and not talk about this in a project management success story, because it loses its whole meaning. And the story I like to use, I needed to get new tires for my car. Took it down to the shop, said, you know what? I'll come back after work. I need to get 4 new tires put on my car. I go back after work, and there's 4 tires sitting on top of my car. And they're like, what do you mean? You said you need tires put on your car, put them on the top of your car. Well, I get that yes, you did what you were asked to do, but does that really meet my need? And I think we often get caught in that, where it's like, you said you needed rooms with projector and screen. I did that. And we never were asked to actually do
They're still in
the
boxes.
job. So it's not the act of putting a pile of stuff in a room that creates success. It's, how do we define what's being done with that and measure that in an effective way?
Yeah, I get dragged into meetings all the time that the user is the expert in AV, and they are wanting a TV in the front of the room, and they want this and they want that. And then you could do that, and that was successful based upon what they think. But are they even the ones using the room? And there's a lot of times where, we have to talk them out of things or show them different things, and just that upfront process of discussing and actually finding out what their needs are, that's sometimes a big challenge, and that sets the tone for the rest of the project or whatever you're talking about as far as delivering that successful experience at the end, right?
Exactly. And Chris, you're in gobs and gobs of construction meetings and things like that, and even that context, success looks different, right? If the project manager of a construction project just wants to get to the end within budget on time, right? So, and sometimes we're brought in hey, I'm doing a building and I need 25 regular classrooms. How many projectors and screens do I need? And it's wait a minute, you're not even asking me for the right thing. And so now you're trying to recreate this conversation. And so to me, it's where's that needs analysis and that synthesis where we define that success level? And are we always even at that conversation?
Well, and it's raised questions for me here at UW in particular, because as the new guy, I've been here about 3 months, and I literally forced my way into a couple of OAC, series for ongoing projects. And I'm asking some of these somewhat innocent questions, but like, hey, you guys are in CDs. What was the intention of this space? It's just listed as multi-purpose space. You know, what are you doing in here? And I started asking those questions. Who's using it? Who's operating this? Who's maintaining? Who's supporting it? What's the concept here? And they don't have answers, which then leads me to two questions. One, did you guys just skip over, you know, the architectural programming side of this? Or did you just say it's a multi-purpose space? And to your point, Mark, like it's got a projector and a screen, done. Like, but how do you know that that space is A, successful in the sense where it delivers what the end users, whoever that might be, is going, you know, delivers what they want. And B, that even if it delivers that, does it do it in the right way? There's no measure of success on that. They're simply looking at, you know, it's a binary thing. You want a multi-purpose room. Does this building have a multi-purpose room? Yes. Success. And I'm like, well, but
where was the McDonald's menu that said multi-purpose room and it picked it and that's what showed up?
Like, yeah, and like I said, I wasn't part of the discussion.
But none of the add-ons.
But I don't think some of those discussions even actually happened the way they should have as part of that architectural programming, because I've been part of that process on many dozens, if not hundreds of projects where you go through that level, and it is a lot of back and forth with end users, like you said, to try, like they're the experts, this is what they want to do, but you have to kind of guide them to the right solution or try to find the right thing or try to tease out what they're trying to do. And then, hey, you tell me what you want to accomplish. Let me figure out the technical solution. Don't come to me saying, I want box ABC. Let me figure that out. You tell me what you're trying to make box ABC do or what you want to do through box ABC, and let me find it.
Yeah, we're basically talking about my largest problem at WKU right now is just getting that buy-in for what their end result is and getting them away from saying TV on wall, input here, and I want speakers there, and I want this there. Like, okay, what are you going to do? And then they describe, well, I'm doing a chemistry lab. It's like, whoa.
Yeah,
it seems like there's it's not seems. I mean, there is obviously this big difference between when you get the opportunity to speak to the potential end user, even if it's the money spender and not necessarily the real end user. Because you can create a checklist of sorts of experience that you're trying to fit. I think some of the biggest challenge of what's successful is those assumption rooms that we have the assumption systems that we have to put in, the generic thing where we think we know what people want to do, but do we? And there's times when I have the time to do this and I have these assumption rooms, I will just kind of commandeer some random administrative assistant or some random teacher and say, hey, come in here and just poke around. I'm not going to tell you what it does. Just let me know. Right? Sometimes I don't. Yeah. Well, and sometimes I don't know.
Jamie's method for experiential AV. Just kind of go poke stuff.
I stand there and I try to answer some questions and point them in the right directions. But really, ultimately, what am I trying to measure here is, were they successful enough in doing whatever they thought they wanted to test? Mm-hmm. Like, they just walk in out of the blue, and I'm like, hey, look, pretend you're going to make a class in here and just poke around until you get what you want. And then you ask them questions like, well, what were you trying to do? Well, I was trying to do these things, but, or if they're poking around too much, you're like, well, maybe I shouldn't have put 72 cross point buttons on a 5-inch panel.
Give you all matrix routing.
Yeah.
So, Jamie, I got a question for you. I got a quick question, and we'll go over to Larry. So, I'm trying to envision this process when you invite these people in. So do you literally stick your head out the classroom door and point at someone and go, hey, come here, poke around a little bit? Yeah. Because that's going to be an HR problem.
He has a rag with some ether on it, and he goes out there and just around the neck and drags
it. Like, come here and poke? Yeah. Like, or poke around? Or like, what's the terminology?
If I can poke them for a little bit. I ask for them to...
I'm sorry. I just need some clarity. Larry, go ahead before he goes way off the rails. Sorry.
Well, and oftentimes,
yes, I do just stick my head out in the closet, out of the closet. Hey, come on in here. I have ice cream.
James came out of the closet.
No, I do. I invite random people in the hallway. I'll invite students in. Be like, hey,
not students. No.
Go put your Xbox on there and see if they can do it. I want to see if they can do it. It takes them 10 minutes. They get out. I get a lot of valuable feedback. Am I really measuring success? I don't know. But I don't have a
maybe
metric.
The operational,
I don't have a grade
binary
card. I think that's what makes it hard. Because we don't have a grade card. There is no A, B, C, D, and F. Right? There isn't one. How well did you do your touch panel? B. Maybe. Well, it's like an 81. So did you really do that? So We don't have one. So how do you that's the part of this question is how do you measure those assumption-based
I would say we do
groups?
actually have one for the touch panel and user interface. Like we can measure our cases as they come in, and we know how many of them are user error. And if our user interface is better, then that should reduce year after year. And another thing that I was going to bring up is we're talking about all this program reports and all this stuff we do on the front side. Often we're talking to the money people, not the end user. I really like to go and observe the end users, the actual end users in the current spaces they're in, assuming it's not like a conference room, if it's a lab, if it's a classroom, if it's an active learning space, anything like that. So I can talk with them and discuss the pain points I saw watching them. And then we can work on ways of them not telling me what they want, but me saying, I saw this pain point. What were you trying to do? How can we make that experience better?
And you have to be careful in that, right? Because they're doing the best they can with what they have in that moment they're in right now.
Yep.
And sometimes they're just now getting to the point where they can define if they're even being successful at all, like operationally. I can turn it on and I guess my PowerPoint's on the screen. So it's working. But sometimes they don't know, right? And there's just so much going on in that real time. And that when we get to deal with the actual end users, it's one thing. And then you get to deal with people that are maybe speaking on behalf of other end users in a meeting. And they're kind of coming at it from this culture of scarcity, right? They're like, shit, if the one thing I'm going to sit here and lobby for to make sure we have is big television screens in the rooms. They don't even know why, but they just know that it's going to be expensive. So God damn it, we need to have big television screens in this room. And it's like, well, what about those? I don't know. Justin says I need to put them in there. So is everybody even at the table? And we oftentimes don't even have any level of, is this going to be successful at all on the front side? And so we can deploy all day long. I think everybody here can manage a fleet of 1 million people and build you 1,000 different AV scenarios, but without asking, like, what does it mean to create like transformational communication experience or teaching and learning experience? Like, what does that mean? How do we actually do that?
So, Mark, one thing you mentioned, and Jamie brought it up too, is that like often the person you're talking to, who's kind of supposed to be your end user, is not the actual end user. They're the person who's there in that role, and generally that's known as the owner's representative or the owner's advocate. Now, it is on them actually to go get that information, and we shouldn't have to do an end run around them because they should come to you with a list of requirements. Because you don't want, if I'm doing a new academic building, I don't want to sit down in a room. Let me rephrase. I do want to sit down in a room with that, but I don't want to sit down at the conference room table for the owner, for the OAC meetings, and then have 150 faculty members there because you're going to get 14,000 different sort of things that they need. That's the role of that owner's rep or that the project champion or whoever that may be should be able to help distill some of those things. But sometimes that is our role to go have those meetings and have those kind of fact-finding missions. I know Jamie involves kidnapping people out of hallways and dragging them into rooms. Larry seems to be a little more intentional and goes and peers through windows of people to see what they're doing. But there's all these different ways to do it, and that's a critical part of the projects. I don't think it happens as enough as it really should, and I'm guilty of that myself. Where we've got a number of rooms we have to kind of reconsider how these need to be done, and I'm going to admit this first round of kind of redoing some of these rooms, I literally wandered around campus. I found the 30 worst rooms on campus, actually about 40 worst rooms, and we tossed a bunch of them because they shouldn't be classrooms at all. But it's going to be, look, for phase one of this, it's just getting more reliable, better, more modern general space technology into these spaces, and then we'll look at some of the more specialized spaces and try to figure out how do we best fit what people need to do on a day-to-day basis down the road. I just want to get these off there. So, and that all relates to the primary metric I'm using right now, and it is purely a triage metric, is tickets coming in. If room 129 gets 7 tickets a day, there's a problem in there. Yeah. But at the same time, if room 130 gets 0 tickets a day, does that mean everything's working, or they're just not submitting tickets?
It means the network doesn't work and the phone doesn't work.
It's not being used.
It means I've disconnected that button on the touch panel that allows me to report tickets.
There you go.
So that is one metric that if you need to like run numbers, but that's nowhere near accurate. All these things we've discussed up until this point, you can't really quantify that. This is more qualitative feedback. Is there such a thing as a qualitative metric? I guess there is now. But there's no way to say I got
47
good comments versus I got 39 tickets for that room over the last week. I mean, I don't really know how to do that. And Justin, I do want to mention that you have mentioned several times, you do harp on it a lot, and it's great because it reminds us that often it's all about setting expectations.
It's one of the most difficult things.
When people need to know, like, what can I do in this room, or what's this room supposed to do? But you always bring up, what does it not do? What is it never designed to do that you're not trying to make it do, or you're trying to do an activity in there that was never conceived to be a part of the use in that space? So is that a reasonable expectation of the room that it should be able to accomplish these tasks, which was never conceived to do? So I do like that you keep bringing that up, and it is helpful.
I've been burnt on that, and I've changed my policy. I'm able to change my own policies of how I work and how I design systems and how I approach systems on campus. And the reason why I do that now, well, I've been burnt on it so many times because, going back to your statement, Chris, we meet most of the time with the IT representative of said college to go over what their rooms are. These people don't teach in the rooms. They never have taught ever before in their lives. And so you're trying to figure out what the faculty need that are behind them that you're not actually talking to. Now, that doesn't happen all the time, but that's kind of the standard operating procedure that we deal with. Sometimes it depends on the person. Sometimes they bring faculty representatives with them, and that IT rep is there in the meeting just as a stakeholder as well. But that's something that, if that IT consultant said, yeah, we need, and I've done this before, I'm guilty in my early years. Yeah, we need a TV on the wall. We need this, that, and do this. And so I did those things. Or the other IT consultant said, this is dating this problem. We need DVDs and VCRs, and we need cable tuners, and we need this, we need this, we need this, we need this. I'm like, great, we can do that. And we gave that to the College of Business. And those items in a lot of those rooms still exist today. Why? Because they can't replace all of that technology that they spent $50,000 on a classroom. And really all they need is a $15,000 to $20,000 classroom to do their job.
So I think we all have talked and may or may not have done presentations around standards, right? Does your standard pertain any information about what the space does or does not do well, right? It's more than just lists and infrastructure. Like, what does that give you if you were to build the standard as I have it here? What does it do? And then we did a practice maybe on the show a lot long ago where we talked about like hiring for a room, right? What does this space do well? And typically, like, does that match some pedagogical style or delivery? Like, works well for this, does well for this type of active learning. Obviously, is different than flat floor classroom. But do we take that level of stance on our standards and say our standard rooms do these top 10 things well and can be used for these different pedagogical styles? Because we're actively starting to go down that road, and hopefully our goals would be to kind of get that into the scheduling system with the registrar, so they know these spaces that are outfitted as such have this tag on them. They are good for these things, and that's kind of marrying like a lot of different systems in there. But it's a huge lift to get there, and it's changing what we define is success. Like, we have to make sure they're doing these X things well to begin with.
Well, and a lot of that from the registrar standpoint, because I'm going through that now, and I've done that at other institutions, is they want to know physical features of the space so they can book. So when you say, I'm teaching my physics class, I need the following things because this is what I need to teach. I need my cable TV, and I need my Blu-ray player, and I need my Apple TV and all that stuff. And you're like, these are not physics related, but that's, separate issue. So they will look for those features, but not necessarily the tasks that they're trying to accomplish. Or to your point, Mark, that kind of that job description, which may be also termed as kind of a higher level, a high level scope of work,
right,
of what the room, the space, the environment is supposed to be able to accomplish. But right now they schedule based on number of chairs and then what sort of general, butts and seats, and what sort of general stuff is in the room. Oh, the room has a projector, and it's got a computer, and it's got cameras for Zoom. All right, that's all we need to know.
Must work. Yep.
Yeah.
We started with our registrar. We started the description based for them many years ago. Mm-hmm. We're up to like 7 or 8 now.
Rooms
where
total?
we said,
wow.
Okay, here's the different tiers, right? And we said, and in this tier, you can expect this room will be able to take be able to do these things. to be able to do these things, right? Recently, we're now in discussions with the registrar of what can they not do.
There you go.
Because we never included that before. There was no reason to.
That's the Justin method.
But now, when we build a new system, that we have the it can and cannots document for whoever the client is, whatever. But on these general spaces, there isn't really a person. So it is the registrar. And we have had to go through within the last year and, like, in a hurry, tag them. Yes, this room is technically this tier, whatever, 18,000, and it can do all of these things. Footnote, it cannot do multiple cameras. It cannot do. Because what we're finding is that these folks' expectations are higher. So they think, oh, I got this active learning room that has 17 displays in it. I can do 17 different Zooms in here at the same time. And we now have to specifically call it out because the registrar's like, I don't know what to tell them when they ask that question. What can it not do? And people don't care what it can do anymore. There is this baseline expectation that it can do something.
All this stuff. Every room can do everything, right? Yeah.
Well, they all assume that every technology-enabled space on a campus must be able to do far more above and beyond what they could do in their kitchen. And sometimes that's just not true.
I ran into this recently. We update rooms and we don't put cameras in every room. And I've been through that story and I've started to say this room is not made for Zoom or web communication or Teams or whatever. And I've gotten some feedback that says, what do you mean we do Zoom in this room all the time? I'm like, well, what are you talking about? We got this webcam here.
I'm doing Zoom right now.
We have this webcam here and we have this mic here up on the lectern. It works great. It's like, by whose definition?
Well, now you're talking about
it was an educational experience for that person to understand what a good room will do if it's Zoom enabled.
And successful with are not the same thing.
Exactly. And so you're starting, if you talk more about what rooms cannot do, a lot of the times it spawns questions like, what do you mean? Why can't it do this? We're doing this right now. I'm like, you should stop that shit right now because here's why. That's a bad experience. Well, no, it's not.
That explains and then you go down why I got 15 tickets.
Yeah, exactly.
Or your student surveys were horrible.
Because they can't see anything. Well, they didn't tell me. Well, they're scared of you. And you go down that road too, right?
But that's the next level, though. Once you've kind of said, okay, I have rooms that can do these things well, can excel during doing these tasks, how do you know they're good at that? Like, where do you engage the faculty and say, hey, you were recently in room XX20Y, whatever it was. Did you do this well? Did it work for you in that? Did it do this? Well, it's supposed to do this. Did you try that? And give me some feedback. Do we ever actually engage and get feedback?
And engaging the faculty is one thing. Engaging the students and finding out what their experience in the room is too.
And so this certainly sounds like a whole lot of stuff that is not in the AV installer's definition of PD. And so now we're starting to get out into like the assessment model of like where this goes. And a lot of our institution, our organizations are like in just deployment mode. Like we just expand, we fix things that are broken and but we've never been formally asked to define success for what you're doing. And that is the new change, right? And so going back to the original question, who asked me that? The new administration has asked me that because this is the direction that we're seeing a lot of institutions, not just our own, move in. And so if you're listening to this right now, and it sounds totally blasphemous to you, like it's coming, like you're going to be asked to redefine success. And it's not how many things you can buy and deploy and put in a classroom. It's what does it mean to the teaching and learning experience as it pertains to students and faculty and the community at large.
So with this show, is this now the start of the Justin policy? And it's going to become a thing across all universities of describing what systems can and can't do? Is that something new?
I don't think it's necessarily something new, but it's probably a good idea to bring up.
The Justin Clause.
We're going to put a Justin Clause, like the Santa Claus, but the Justin Clause.
Throw that right back at them when they say, what can I do in this room? I say, what can't you do?
Yeah. You tell me what you can't do.
So I do want to bring up something, Justin, your comment about the you're like, this room isn't really Zoom capable. And like, we do Zoom all the time. So, whoa. And I'm going to mention one of Larry's favorite programs that IU did was the Mosaic program. And the Mosaic program was an intentional instructional program working with instructors, with faculty, and they would kind of go through was it a semester long, I think, kind of like as a fellow to kind of learn how to actually design the curriculum for active learning. But there were also these spaces that were intentionally designed to support that. And the problem that they ran into at IU was it was a very successful program. So the problem was it was too successful. They had departments who would go build their own versions and like, oh, I just put a bunch of TVs on the wall and there's some tables for students. It's a mosaic room. And they started calling them that. Mm-hmm. And the university, the larger university, ran into an issue where they're like, well, now it's not clear what makes a mosaic room, because that brand is kind of getting diluted. But also, is that fair to people who think that's what they're getting, is one of these very intentionally designed kind of, specifically built systems for active learning that were done in concert with this long program of working with these, I think they had like a Mosaic fellowship program sort of thing. Mm-hmm. They would work through all this, but just down the hall, the other department's just going to slap that name on the wall and call it a mosaic room. And then faculty get into that room and like, this is different. It doesn't work the same way. I can't do some of these things. It doesn't report back the inputs, whatever that might be. So they actually came up with this kind of the long way around, but to the qualitative or the quantitative side of things, they came up with like a Mosaic certification program, this very complex kind of method of how can we rate and rank these rooms so we can say you get a score, and I don't remember exactly, but it was like 0 to 100 or something, out of how many Mosaic points do you get for various types of spaces, which are not necessarily technology, because there was like a base level of technology, but it was like what sort of tasks and activities can you successfully do in these spaces? And Justin, to your point, you can just go do those anywhere, but is it really the same sort of thing to say this is an intentionally built learning space and you're going to do something that it was never really designed to do? And they've been leveraging so like a certified Mosaic room to say it met certain qualifications. And if a department wants to build their own, they can submit that for certification. But once the idea is that certification is out there as at least some measure of how successful or how intentional is this space for an active learning class or active learning curriculum. To avoid those sort of scenarios where they're like, yeah, we've been doing active learning in here for years. And that's not to say you can't, but not as part of the Mosaic program. They wanted to make sure that was a very specifically used phrase or branding on the various campuses. So
I'd say, like, if you're looking for ways to like even go about this, find one thing is go find instructors. Find your most problematic ones, the ones that will call and give you tickets all the time, and just set up a time and talk to them and just ask them. So, what do you like or what you don't like about this space? Because they always will love to tell you what they do not like about a space. And don't ask them, can it do these things? Because again, it's lagging. They will make it work one way or another. But ask them, if it was better, what would it be? Right? And so start to rethink about what it means to successfully give them tools and ask them, like, what are they trying to do? And don't let them just talk about, I need this tool or need that tool, because that's not the conversation. It's what is the experience you are trying to create for yourself and your students.
Or what Larry always harps on is like, how does this tool that they may like, and how does that support their teaching and learning? Not like, it's cool, I can show things up there. I'm like, all right.
But why?
Why? Yeah. We know it's cool. It was in the list at the beginning of the show. So like,
and we talk about that a lot in general, specifically to the idea of these wireless sharing devices. It's like students can get their stuff up there. I'm like, yeah, if you remove that barrier of entry for a student to share from their device to the front of the room for everyone to see, that can support teaching and learning in a lot of different ways. But if you start talking about, and you can send 4 things up here at once and I can move things around, we can annotate, it's like, is that really supporting it? Or are you just picking features now that look kind of neat? So
that's that WMD thing, the weapons of mass distraction. It's like, don't deploy tools that become like way more distracting to the user.
You could make the argument that if my teaching needs that, I want students to work in groups and they can annotate and stuff. Okay, fine. If you're talking about that, that's one thing. But that's a very specific case, I would argue. So.
Yeah, and so being intentional, like what are you trying to create as an experience, and here are the supporting tools you need for that.
And the other flip side of all this is, if one person says they need telestration in every room, don't do what they say, because you got to figure out, you got to meet something in the middle, because you're going to have faculty that go off the standard deviation way to the left or way to the right on what they need, and you're going to have to collect information from multiple areas of where faculty are teaching and how they're teaching. And also it's space-based too, right? It's generic classroom versus specialty lab versus X, Y, and Z. So I think know your audience.
There's people out there that are like, well, how do you make a standard space that does all these things? And sorry, spoiler alert, there isn't one. There isn't a standard space that does every single thing well. Like
correct.
There's a right space for the right task. And so you got to be more granular, right? So what's your baseline success versus what are these unique space successes? And it's all about that conversation, right? And that needs analysis and that scope of work.
So I guess the question is, after having this conversation for the last 20 odd minutes, back to the initial question is, how do we measure success in higher ed? And it's, how do we measure success with AV systems in higher ed, sort of thing? But I don't think there really is a good answer. It's more that it's qualitative, not quantitative. I mean, it's a
lot of
really
variables. It's multifaceted, right?
Yeah.
It's
we're not
budget.
tracking that. We're like, I got a score of 43, so I know we're good. It doesn't work that way.
I think right now you're trying to build the conversation and the assessment of it. So, and be willing to have done it wrong. And
so, Mark, I do want to ask this.
It.
This was your suggestion for a topic because this is something you're going through right now. So, what is your response on how do you measure success in your spaces?
And right now, it's coming up with the correct definition of what success even is. Like, so it's like I can do these things well, and then engaging with the faculty and say, okay, we did this based on what you said it needed to do well. Did it do it well? Yes or no, so that we can actually grade those pieces. And
so it's a longer term process. It's not. I got a score of 87 in this room. It's like no. It's we came up with these very high level and holistic definitions of the tasks and activities you can do in these spaces and how that supports teaching. And then we'll go back to faculty and ask what they think as far as how successful are these. And then you'll have to distill and synthesize that down to what they like or don't like about various spaces on campus.
And so it's being data driven, right? We have to make a data set to be able to assess and say, okay, yes, we're going to make this change or make that change. But right now we're trying to define what the data should even be. And that is going to be engaging with the faculty. And it's not, we're not just working for facilities or capital projects or whatever it may be. It's that, just deploying rooms. It's okay. You deployed rooms, yes, but we set out to deploy rooms that were good for this, this, and this. Did you achieve that? Yes or no? So,
well, there you go. That's your short answer is grade everything on a score of 0 to 1 and ask people accordingly what they think.
Yeah, it's all about engagement, conversations with
it's longer term. It's faculty surveys and having some focus groups and some follow-up and trying different things and engaging with those faculty long-term over the course of several semesters or several years to kind of constantly be modifying, spaces to improve them. So.
And if nothing else, if you're listening to this and it sounds like a bunch of hogwash, that's fine. Maybe it does. Just start thinking about stop and ask yourself, if I'm doing this, am I creating success for the faculty? And if so, what were we trying to do or not? Just kind of get in the practice of asking those questions. How will I know if I'm successful in doing this?
So any last thoughts from anybody else before we close out and go to a commercial to pay the bills?
I want to copyright the Justin policy.
Done.
The Justin policy. All right. Just
perfect.
Reverse it. Ask what it can't do. So, all right. Well, Mark, push that other button and we'll come back. Do you have a question for the AV Super Friends, a topic to suggest, or were we just really, really wrong on something and you'd like to give us a piece of your mind? Well, don't just yell at your computer. Send us an email and we'll actually read it. mailbag@avsuperfriends.com. We're always looking for good ideas to steal, discuss openly. And if your message is just full of great stuff, we might just invite you on the show. Mailbag@avsuperfriends.com. All right, so our final segment here, we're going to go shopping, and this is going to piss off Mark to no end because we just spent 30 minutes talking about it's not about the stuff.
It's all
Don't
about the
design
stuff.
rooms about the
Don't
stuff.
listen to me.
We're about to do it right now about the stuff because here's why. So let's call this segment. Maybe it's a recurring segment. If we're lucky, it's a recurring segment, but probably not.
We'll never
if you had $100,000. And so what happened here? I have $100,000.
I had $1 million.
I've got way more than that.
Not a real fur coat.
$2.4 million.
I'd buy you a boat.
So our CIO set aside, because as his budgeting method supports this, setting aside kind of these reserve funds. And as we're coming up based on the general planning for next year's budget and the way the supply chain is running right now, we've recognized that this reserve fund, we probably should not sit on that until April to figure out what we need to use it on. We need to use that in December. So we have it for April. And so the question was basically brought to me of like, well, hey, if you had $100,000, what would you do with it on campus? What spaces would you upgrade? And so we started with a big list of sorts of spaces and what we a little bit of conversation back and forth determined, well, we'd like to get as many eyes on this as possible. And from a registrar's perspective, as many butts in those seats as possible. So as many people as possible can experience whatever these new technologies are. And also we'd like to think of these sort of things, not just high fly and let's go nuts and create a whole bunch of crazy stuff, but what sorts of things might we be considering for general classroom spaces in 5 or 10 years? So what sort of technology should we be looking at? And there's all sorts of things we can throw around out there, but I've got I've got a short list. I've got a long list. I want to hear from you guys. If you had $100,000 and we're told, find a largish room, so a room that's maybe 100, 150, 200 seats, so it's a larger room that you can get more people in, what would you do in those rooms?
Oh, that was very specific. So my question was going to be, is this general? And it's not. It's very specific to a room. And is this one-time money or is this reoccurring every year money? Because I would spend it completely different if it was, here's $100,000. You may not see it again.
Right now.
The assignment is it's one-time funds, but the idea is these are technologies and sorts of things we want to try out in these spaces that might become things that are common 5 or 10 years from now.
Well,
So
I was going to say training,
but
I was going to say training and tools and staff development because
none of that stuff.
Because
in
I
rooms.
because I can't spend money that's one time on a room like that, because in 5 to 10 years,
Justin Claus,
we could.
Justin, along. Imagine if you could.
All right.
I'm not
Somebody
asking,
else go, because I got to rethink
I'm
this
not asking
now.
what would you do at WKU. I'm saying if your budget for a project was just raised by $100,000 with the charge of what future facing sort of technologies would you look at? What are those technologies?
I'll jump on this sword for you, Chris, a little bit, just get it kicked off. So one of the things that in part of the assessment and kind of asking of some faculty, and there is this new common awareness about like windowing, right? And so I need to run multiple applications and have them open at the same time on my window. And there is now this newfound understanding of resolutions and aspect ratios that's like this great renaissance of Windows awareness. So things that allow you to have side-by-side True HD correct image size in spaces, and we're starting to look at that now as well, like multi-windowing, maybe, oh my God, are we finally at 4K resolution projection in rooms, things like that.
No,
so
you're not. But
no, we're not.
spoiler
We know
alert.
we're not. I know, but like at least I'm sensing some acknowledge that there is a request that we're starting to see some of this need, and so I would look at ways to facilitate kind of some of those workflows.
Mm-hmm.
So I was thinking about like what I needed, and what I needed for the future of higher ed isn't out right now. So anyone listening, feel free to steal this and make tens of dollars with it. I don't care.
Tens of dollars.
Yeah, tens of dollars. The product's called Student Teacher Advanced Display Interactive Agility Lab. What it is
this an actual thing?
This is
one part.
something that I'm
Buzzwords.
giving them.
One
lot of
I'm giving
marketing.
them the idea they can go make it and make all kinds of money.
But it's not just
those
application.
air walls that take multi-purpose spaces, large ones, and turn them
make
into two pseudo-useful spaces?
It takes one big unusable room and makes them into two smaller unusable rooms.
Yes. One
Exactly.
Big turbo 1 to 2.
This does the same thing except with classrooms. What it does is the area around the instructor has a movable wall that you can seal that off. Then you can use the student area to house the students that don't want to be in the room with the actual instructor. And the instructor can stay in the area without the actual students. And you could put ideally 2 direct view LEDs, but with 100,000, that's not going to work. So just 2 ultra short projectors just to tick Chris off.
This is the no front classroom, right? Like
This
there's just
is the
nothing
no
at
front
all.
classroom, but you can use your actual classrooms, put this wall in. You
And they
don't have to
communicate via Zoom,
redesignate
right?
anything. Connect them with Zoom. You're done. All of a sudden, all of your rooms across campus are now the latest and greatest.
Larry, this is why you don't get invited to those OAC meetings.
I know.
Well, I'm actually going to contradict Larry a little bit. So if it's a 200-seat auditorium, more than likely it would have projection in it, and I would take that out and just purchase a 185-inch direct view LED wall with a lifetime warranty that I'll never have to deal with again. I just call the manufacturer and they come in and replace shit, because that's real and that does happen now. And I'm actually installing one here soon.
185 is probably too small, but yes. Okay, I get your point.
Lifetime warranty is the kicker there.
Whose lifetime, yours or mine?
The video
All
wall, I
they
guess.
have to do is define the lifetime of the video wall is 3 years, and it's like that's not much of a warranty. So
Yeah, I've got it in writing. We'll see.
I don't know,
See
Jamie,
if it
any
holds
thoughts?
up.
Yeah, we're gonna assume I have a space that this is appropriate in.
Final Frontier.
So we'll put it there. But
I didn't have a
like
space when they gave me money. I had to go find a space. So
yeah. Well, I mean, I just had this exercise. They came to me and said, we have 100.
Spend it.
We have $100,000. You need to spend it by the end of the calendar year. And our maintenance and repair pool was so depleted that's where it all went. Maintenance and repair equipment. But in this practice, I really kind of I want a non-departmental individual like distance ed classroom, just front, no audience, right? So it does not go into a giant room, and we've seen them, there are certain companies that use like the words we and connect to build these things on their own. But to do something that way, that's not departmental owned, that can be used by anybody as part of this drive towards high flex, hybrid, instructing to the masses, even though they're not in front of you, push. And I would really like to do that with proper lights, proper everything, that they could just start teaching, and the team Zoom gallery view is there in front of them, and it's very interactive and a little bit better. I have one or two that's going to go in, but they're department owned and they're locked down to only them, but other people are interested. Yep. And so I'd really like to do that. If I had to pick a space, I would really like to do that one of those similar to the classroom in the round things that some of you have done. I can't get anybody to bite on it. Yeah,
it's hard.
Because but I have a lot of people that would be a very beneficial thing for 200 seats. To fix sight lines for some of these things, and they are very dynamic speakers, but the campus just will not bite. But those are the ideas I'd have. But I think if I had the $100,000, it would be and maybe it's a miniature version of that no audience classroom. It's just the front of room, and it's just the teacher doing their gig by themselves, and they just walk in and start. I know 100,000 is not quite enough, but you could get a miniature version going.
Having built several of those, $100,000 won't even touch that.
Yeah,
it's not too outrageous. I mean, you can get close, but I think the better use of the money is probably to hire an outside consultant for $95,000 to best spend $5,000.
You have any recommendations? Maybe somebody's on the call right now.
I'll take that gig.
Yeah, there you go. All right, so spoiler, I'll tell you what I'm going to do with this money. So first thing we did was we identified like 5 or 6 spaces, and then realized you can't spread it that thin. And then we identified 2 spaces, one of which is they're both kind of, I would call them small auditoriums. They both seat around 150 to 170 sort of thing, which meets the requirement of getting as many butts in seats as possible, because then more people see that. So if you say, why did this room cost so much? Oh, well, 700 people a day see this room as opposed to a room that has 30 seats sort of thing. I like the concept of a front of room space, but that's, would require more construction than we want to try to deal with for the $100,000. And keeping in mind the timeline on this is something we need to order gear in the next probably 6 weeks, so we have it by next summer. We looked at 2 of these small auditoriums, one of which is very cool architecturally because it's in an older building, but it's also in an older building. And Jamie, to your point, it's owned by a department, which would potentially make scheduling a pain. So we skipped that one. And we looked at another one, which is only about 40 years old and has pretty standard sheetrock walls and that sort of thing. You can get in there. And so what I looked at was what rooms have just a big, flat, architecturally boring front wall, because that gives me more literal real estate to play with. And Mark, to your point, and Jamie, spoiler, since you've already heard me asking about it, I'm looking at right now either oversized projection with a processor or edge blended projection with multiple displays. Because my goal on this is to what sort of easy, low-hanging fruit problems can I solve in a future classroom? And one of the biggest ones I get, and you guys probably hear this a lot too, is your damn projection screens cover my whiteboards, which means, I have to use a wall talker, or I'm using some sort of interactive, and those are all terrible. So the space I found has 9 feet between the top of the whiteboard to the ceiling, which means I can do side-by-side projection in that space and not affect the whiteboard. So that solves that problem. I can do side-by-side projection with the video processor and edge blend that. So it gives one large ultra-wide, think of it as like an ultra-wide monitor on your desk. It gives you one large ultra-wide display in which you can arrange as many content sources as you like, and that becomes a software issue. But that means something we can work with presets and we work with instructors and customize that to do kind of like Jamie, like we did in Block years ago. We could do here's side by side or just one thing in the middle. We can do a couple of simple ones, but maybe there's some advanced ones for people who want to get a little more advanced in their content layouts. I want my notes over here. I'm going to move my Zoom call over there, or whatever that might be. We can give them that flexibility. In addition, I'm going to do some other kind of low-hanging fruit we hear a lot about, especially in large spaces. People love those whiteboards, those marker boards, but you can't read those from the back of the room. I know, Justin, you talk about that a lot. You can't go to the back and see those. So I'm going to put in some cameras on those marker boards so I can IMAG that content, get it into the same displays that are directly above it. So people are now still looking kind of in the same area, but they're seeing much larger content, which then also gets recorded and goes into Zoom and all that good stuff. So, things like that. Maybe look at some auto tracking cameras, just more of as a, is this something worth considering, or an auto framing camera rather than just the standard PTZs that they have preset 1, 2, 3. So we can look at some of those things. The nice thing about this room was somebody goofed up a number of years ago, and they literally plumbed the space for surround sound, but never put it in. So there are there's existing boxes in the walls and conduit to those for speakers all the way around, but it was never in there. So they're going to get proper surround sound processing. I may work with QSC on that and actually get that to be a certified cinema, or look into that process just as an added Benny. Not to say that's going to be something that is going to be the future or going to be part of all future classrooms, but just, hey, in spaces that are appropriate, why the heck not? With the big caveat that you don't get to use that for your standard classes, because that's not what surround sound is for. And I keep seeing that done, not just here, but in many other spaces, many other institutions around the country. Is someone will put in surround sound and then try to use that as their standard kind of program audio for the space, which is absolutely not what you want to do, because now students are having a different experience depending on where they're sitting in the room. So you can't rely on that. So anyway, those are the sorts of things I'm looking at. Again, all those are pretty straightforward, easy things to do in a sense, but I just see it as an opportunity to say, I've got a room which is not going to require much construction at all, but at the same time, I can put $100,000 into this and kind of bring it up to speed with what a modern classroom is, plus some additional things that, maybe we're just trying out. Like Mark, like you said, people are used to kind of this canvassing idea, this content manipulation, because they've been teaching for the last year from home and they bought a 27-inch monitor and they can move stuff all over the place. So why don't we give them that same capability in a classroom, assuming, of course, we can maintain appropriate content sizing so people throughout the space can see it. Now, the advantage of both these rooms, even though they are a little bit larger, the farthest viewer is just under 50 feet away. So it's not terrible. They're not way out there. They're not way in a mezzanine or something like that. So there's some potential there to still say we can do appropriately sized content with a digital canvas kind of concept, and not impact the marker board systems. We can get rid of the ancient terrible lectern and put in a proper slimline lectern. There's an existing AV closet I can bury stuff in that they don't need to care about. So I can dramatically simplify and streamline that front of room experience, that stuff that has to live up there, but give them some added kind of niceties and features to allow for some, different types of teaching in that space. And we're working with our teaching and learning center on that to try out some of those things and see what they like so they can be involved. And then to our earlier conversation, we can then work with the faculty who get scheduled into this space to use them for feedback to determine, is this something, or are any of these things, or all of it, or is any of this worth pursuing for future spaces? So it is very much an experiment, but kind of think of it as a sandbox without the ability to dramatically change the space, more so one of we're trying out different technologies in here. So.
And you have your success statement, right? That you're going to be able to facilitate new learning methodology and pedagogical delivery in your space. I'm sure you have all that dialed in, right?
That's exactly, yeah. It's more of like, hey, my measure of success on this is if we don't get a bunch of calls from it, success. Because right now that room gets a ton of calls.
No, but think about it. Like you're adding new experience and new capability that currently does not exist in your normal teaching space, and attempting to gather feedback about the way we're going to spend money in teaching and learning spaces in the future. So that's money well spent.
Mm-hmm. It's very much an experiment, but it's something I think that's going to be fun to do. So the downside is, of course, the short time frame and the limited amount of construction we do, because I think that's where a lot of you went. It was like, let's immediately tear apart this room or let's build this thing. I was like, well, for $100,000, you're not going to be doing much of that. especially in the high concept sort of thing. It's just not going to happen. I did look at LEDs, and Justin, to your point, I looked at LEDs too, that were appropriately sized for the space. It'd have to be for a 1080p, even a 1080p LED at I think 1.2 pixel pitch or something would have to be 220 inches, and those are $150,000 just to start, just for that. So
just to look at them, just to open the website, you got to put your credit card in there.
Yeah, you can't. We're not going to even tell you what the price is. You can't afford it. We've checked your credit score, and it's not happening. I think a lot of people would like to see something like that in spaces, but I think that's still way down the road, or the sort of things you do only in those very, very high-end specialized spaces. So for a general space, it's just not quite there. So we'll report back on that and see how that goes. Hey, extra money, we'll use it appropriately. So
plan ahead of time. Get in, beat the rush, and think about how it's going to be successful.
Yeah, I'm just putting stuff in there. We'll make it happen. Well, we've managed to ruin yet another episode of AV Super Friends Off the Rails. You can contact us with questions, topic ideas, or general complaints at mailbag@avsuperfriends.com. If you complain loud enough, we might just invite you on the show.
Nice work, everyone. Sharp broadcast. Really good. Everyone on the floor as well. Really a lot of hustle. I liked it.
The opinions expressed by the AV Super Friends are solely those of the individuals and do not represent their respective institutions, organizations, companies, or clients.